Hi, this is Meg Riley, Minneapolis. We were like, who's starting? Who's starting? I am in Minneapolis where it's sunny, and it is so amazing to see the sun. It spent January, we didn't. And really, when it came back, we all almost fell on the ground, even though it was 20 degrees. It makes such a difference. Vitamin D, it's a thing, y'all. ASA Hauser, how are you?
Hi, I'm ASA Hauser, and today I'm in Houston, Texas, where I brought Seattle weather with me, which I'm not happy about even a little bit, because Seattle hasn't seen the sun since November, something. So I hear it's going to be sunny later today or tomorrow. So yay. I hope so. I'm now skeptical. Michael Tino, where are you? How are you?
Good morning, everyone. This is Michael Tino in Peekskill, New York. It's actually gray here today, but that's just fine because we've actually seen the sun off and on, and yeah, it matches the mood of the nation, this gray, cloudy sky. And on that lovely note, Christina Rivera, how are you?
I feel the same, Michael. It's great here. Hi, everyone. I'm Christina Rivera. I'm coming to you from Charlottesville, Virginia, where it is gray, rainy. We actually have a flood alert because I guess just rain. So yeah, it's just, yeah, it's going to be raining all next week as well. And for the first time in VUU, my time on the VUU, you all are going to actually see how short I am. Because I'm usually, a full figure in your stream. You have no idea that I am this short. But today, you'll get to meet my sons, and you will see, you've already seen just truly how little.
You could have sat on a phone book or something.
Yeah, that's about what it would take. One of those little, I could borrow one of those things from like a restaurant and sit it here and put my butt in it. All right, here we go. I'll just do like this the entire show. Antonia, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm in New Jersey today. It's also gray and rainy. Things are okay. I'm back from Meatville. I missed you all in VUU World. I'll be the one over on the chat, getting your questions to the guest and host. Ask many and plentiful and interesting questions, because we have the benefit of having our youth, or are they young adults? I'm going to find out here on the VUU today.
Yes, we do have youth in the house. Whoop, whoop. Yay, we're so excited. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves. I'm going to start off, let's say, I guess in, I don't know, chronological, alphabetical order. There we go.
I'm Andres Rivera Young, ACM pronouns. I'm also in Charlottesville, and I'm also the senior dean for GA Youth at General Assembly. So,
I don't know.
Chronologically, it goes Molly next.
Oh, what?
Yeah, no. Alphabet, M-A.
Oh, there we go. We're good. Okay, Molly, it's all you.
Hi, I'm Molly Gottfried. I use she, her pronouns. I'm from Corvallis, Oregon, and I am one of the chairs for the Pacific Northwest District's Youth Board, and I have staffed several of our biannual youth conferences, and I'm getting involved nationally as well.
All right.
I'm Miguel Rivera Young, and I also use he, him pronouns, and I am a lifelong UU, been raised that way, and I was active nationally with the Right Relationship team, and also staffed the Youth Ministry Revival, some other things like that.
Yeah. So to hit the inevitable question, yes, they are twins. Yes. Yeah. These two. Yeah. Absolutely.
Get it a lot.
But. Yeah, get a lot. We'll just get that right out of the way. So we are excited to have you youth on the VUU. Since I've been on the VUU, which I think is like a year or two, I've been trying to find a time when youth could be on the VUU. It's really hard because it's 11 a.m. Eastern when they're usually in school, 8 a.m. Where Molly is, so she's trying to get into school. So it's taken me this long to finally get them to be seniors where they can take some time off of school and be able to be here. So we're thrilled, and hopefully we'll be able to work this out so more youth can be on the VUU soon. So I'm just going to start it off with, Molly, I'm actually going to start off with you. Is like, what drew you to being in VUU youth leadership?
So I attended my first UU Youth Con the spring of my freshman year, and I'm a junior, so that was like a little less than 2 years ago. And just like I've been a UU my whole life, and I was always kind of like, yeah, like it's great, but I never felt really connected to it. And I went to that con, and I was surrounded by like 125 other UU youth who were passionate about the same things as me, and it was incredible. And I would just look around and just realize that everyone was a UU, and it was the most like inclusive and just the most amazing space that I've ever been in. And immediately after I went home, I applied to be on the youth board, and I applied to be on staff for the next con, and I just kind of like threw myself into it after that. And since then, I've just kept getting involved, and I've stayed involved, and I love all of it. And yeah.
Same question.
Sure.
Same question. Okay. It was always kind of odd for me because we attend a really kind of small congregation, and our youth group has always been small, and so I have really fond childhood memories of kind of playing around in the yard outside of church, kicking around the soccer ball with my brother, and like all the adults like talking to me, but I never really saw youth opportunities. And then our mother shipped us away to Thrive, and we were a little bit reluctant to go, like I'll be honest, at first. And that was really life-changing, not only to see other UU youth, but UU youth of color in a space like that was really powerful. And it kept me connected to people because we knew that we were going to be in this together, and we're still in this together. And then right after that, she shipped us off again to Goldmine, and that was also a really fun experience.
Yeah, I kind of tried to do the latter, so I did like Thrive, Goldmine as well, and then applied to be on youth staff because I thought that I could probably bring some of my experience to more youth at General Assembly. And I'd been to other General Assemblies before, so I kind of knew what it was about. And so Thrive is a leadership school for youth of color, and Goldmine is just a leadership school open to anybody. And so we went to both, and I took the skills that I learned there and applied them to youth staff once I applied my first time.
So what I would say is kind of important about what Andres and Miguel just shared as a parent is that Miguel's not wrong when he says I ship them off. I think that so often I hear parents saying that their kids, even young kids or maybe middle school age, they don't really necessarily want to go to RE, or that this is something that's optional. And I don't really relate to that culturally, because church culturally for us isn't optional. It's not something that children really have that much say in, especially when they're younger and in middle school. And I'm always a little bit surprised culturally when I hear that that's an option for our children in religious education. I think that there should be options for them in religious education and what they do in there and how they go about their lives. But I think that if we're taking seriously our responsibility as parents of being the primary religious educator in our children's lives, then we need to do that. And so that includes, seeing what opportunities are out there for our youth and getting them there. And, applied for all sorts of scholarships and financial aid to be able to get them to all of these wonderful opportunities that they talk about. And, you know, the UUA came through with a lot of that. But I think that there has to be some ownership on parents as primary religious educators. You know, often Aisha and I are in religious education spaces. Aisha, maybe you can speak to this, that, you know, sees us as the primary religious educator, and we only have kids for an hour and a half once a week if we're lucky.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it always cracks me up when parents are like, my 5-year-old doesn't want to go. I'm like, how is your 5-year-old ruling your life? But that's clearly culturally different. And yes, parents are the primary religious educators. And at some point, I do want to ask the three of you to reflect on what it's like for you in your brick and mortar congregations. Because one of the tensions that I experience as a religious educator is I love that youth, especially youth of color who've gone to cons. I will say my son had a terrible experience at con and now goes to a Presbyterian church, but that's a whole nother show. For the youth for whom it works for, like the three of you, what I found at the congregation where I am now, the youth get so involved with the regional district cons that they actually, I think something gets lost in the youth group where they are. And that's been a tension that I haven't been, because I don't want youth not to be excited about con, but then for the youth for whom con doesn't work, whether it's because they're introverted or, you know, they just can't go, or they don't want to go, that doesn't feed them in the same way. One of the things I've tried to inspire or even talk directly with youth that I've had that have been rock stars in the region or district to say, and we need you here. We need you to be a leader every week, you know, or as often as you can come. So I'd love for the three of you to speak to that tension that I've noticed. Anybody?
Yeah, for me, I definitely, there is a big divide between the culture at con and the culture in my church. But I also do think that in Corvallis, we have a really strong youth group. Not necessarily we have a lot of people, but the people who do show up are there fully, and they're there because they want to be. And not everyone has been to con. But that is something that I've been struggling with, is how to be a leader and also how to not be a leader in my congregation, because I kind of want that space to be somewhere where I can like get fed and I don't have to put in all of my energy into that as well. And it's hard to get that without get what I want without being the person who leads it. And that's been difficult for me, especially being the only youth of color in my church. I don't get any of that stuff that I need outside of cons. And a lot of the time I just kind of go to church and I'm like, I don't love going to my youth groups all the time because I don't get a lot out of it, which is really sad. And I'm really glad that I have a big support system and network of UUs in my district and around the country, because I know that a lot of people don't get that. And I think that that is the reason why I've been so connected to this faith. And it's nothing against my home congregation, but the reason why I'm connected is because of the other experiences that I've had.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sit here and trash my home congregation or anything, but I mean, we've rescheduled our youth group 3 times this month. We haven't met this month or last month, maybe, I don't really know, but it's just because we're so small that if 1 or 2 people can't go, there's really no point in having it, because it's just going to be us there just kind of, shooting the breeze with our RE director. So, it's difficult because I enjoy my congregation and I try to step up when I can and have the adults in the congregation see that youth have this power to lead, and that when we do, we should be listened to. But I also find myself frustrated when my youth group doesn't have the resources or like honestly sometimes the commitment to want to make that happen.
It's hard for us too because where we're located, there isn't that big a con culture like there is on most of the West Coast. So we don't get like that necessary like UU youth contact that you might get from con. We don't get that very often. So youth group, we have to be leaders there too. It's just kind of like a necessity type of thing. But it's kind of hard when that's like your only UU youth experience, like face to face, before like with like months on end in between.
Yeah, I'd say that's real for particularly for, you know, as Andres mentioned, in the southern region, they're just for a lot of different reasons, the con culture is really dropped off or is non-existent now. And so for a lot of things, I've had to take Andres and Miguel to Central East region. You know, the youth ministry revival that Miguel mentioned was primarily Central East region focused. And it's just been really, really hard to get resources to be able to do any kind of, not even con, but just gatherings of youth in the southern region, you know, for a while.
So you're kind of getting to what I've been wondering about. You know, I was the youth director back in the early 90s, 89 to 92, when there was a national, continental YRUU, and a newspaper that was by and for youth, and young adults working at the UUA, and I liked it. and then it was YRU was disbanded, and as we've talked about here, I think we all share frustration about that it was disbanded without something else evolving, because things change. But I don't really even understand the lay of the land anymore. So is it like Goldmine is a regional thing from the West, right? Or is that for the whole, all UUs? And what are the opportunities for youth who want to be in leadership besides General Assembly? There's no youth council anymore. There's no, I mean, so I just kind of would love the basics of what's going on. I feel pretty out of it, actually.
Yeah, it's, you know, I think we're coming up on this next, the generation that Andres and Miguel and Molly, you know, shout out to your sister, Carrie, who's also another, now a young adult, you know, just bridged UU youth leader. We are now coming up on the first generation of UU young adults who don't even know what YRUU is in the context of national. They may have had YRUU in their home congregation because it's still what it's called there, but they have no understanding of YRUU or what was it before it? Anyways, yeah. I think it's going to be really interesting to see the difference in leadership, you know, and what that means to our faith. We have so many leaders right now, you know, Susan Frederick Gray and Carrie McDonald and people who came up through YRUU. And, you know, I think it's going to be, you know, the contrast is there's going to have to be, you know, analysis over that. And to answer your question, so no, there is no national, you know, organization of youth. Their Goldmine is a program that's available, you know, regionally. So it's not just West, it's available, you know, in any region that wants to run it, that has folks who are trained in it. Which, you know, if you're not running it, then of course you don't have folks that are trained in it. There's a new program that Shannon Harper piloted last summer, River Rising, which I think is the new-ish Goldmine. Southern Region, yes, Patrick Farrell mentioned that the Southern Region has Ships Ahoy program for youth leadership training. That is a model of, they meet once at the beginning of the program, church year, once at the end, and the rest of the meetings are virtual. And so, and then as Carrie
Is it Ships Ahoy because of Blue Boat Home? I'm trying to get the ship metaphor in Southern Region, what that is.
I know it's a little rough. It's ships. What I finally figured out, because I had that same question, what I finally figured out is the program is based on discipleship, relationship. There's like 5 ships, like 5 things that that have the ship has is at the end, and that's how they got the ships. Like ships in common vernacular is about relationship, right? And so ships okay. But yeah, you know, some areas have really strong con culture, like Molly's talking about, and some areas have nothing. And so, you know, I think, you know, yeah, we're gonna be seeing a really big difference in what that leadership looks like. And I don't know. I mean, I think that's one of the unknowns.
And one of the disappointments in having so many in the, I think we have jagged rocks or 5 rocks in the West Coast, and there's ships in the South. It's not, I mean, it's funny and it's not funny because it's like this coded, like, what does it mean? And wouldn't it be great if we had a national, if we all were on the same page with how we affirmed youth ministry, that wasn't these, I know they're not meant to be gimmicky. I'm using that word not to be disrespectful, but to say, I had no idea what Ships Ahoy meant either. I was like, but when you explained it, sure, it makes sense. However, wouldn't it be great if we were, and that's where the loss of having a national cohesive youth movement, youth, something that really connects everyone, because youth cons are a mixed bag. They're wonderful when they're wonderful. It's like our congregations, and one of the things I lament is how our congregations don't center youth ministry in the way that would be just healthier for our movement. Center children, center youth, and integrate youth ministry in a substantive way. It feels like it's always either an add-on, or one of the things I did when I first came to Easter, I said, don't ask the youth, youth inclusion is not asking them to do things. That's not including youth. That's a transactional relationship. And sure, you can pay youth to do whatever you want. You can ask them with their consent, but that's not including youth. So let's be clear, if you're going to include youth, you're asking them to be a substantive part of this congregation, not simply asking them to do anything.
So we have a number of folks online who are engaging in conversation now. AJ Van Tyne says, I'm a minister and 27, and I barely have a sense of national VUU. It was disbanded at the same time I joined con leadership in 10th grade. Janine Gelsinger writes, we talk a lot about what successful bridging of youth looks like, what young adult involvement looks like in congregations. And Charles Dumond asks a question of our panelists. So I want to pass along this question and give the 3 of you a chance to reflect on this. Charles wonders, Charles says, I would be interested if the guests could reflect on experiences they have with conflict between adult facilitators and youth leadership about the amount of empowerment that is granted to the youth. So I'm wondering, Molly, Miguel, Andreas, do you have experiences with that? Has that been a conflict in your experience? And if so, how has that played out?
Yeah, so at the Youth Ministry Revival, there was a lot of conflict around people feeling like the adults were doing like the majority, the lion's share of the planning and stuff. And it was interesting because it wasn't actually the youth leaders who thought that that was the case. It was like the people who were like somewhat facilitators, but also some people who were just at the Youth Ministry Revival. And I felt like it was like a really good partnership with Shannon, Carrie, me, and a couple other people. So it was interesting to see people want youth to have like sole power when sometimes that's not the best way to do things.
And this is why I think that having adults who will support you and let you do your own work but have your back in that is so important. Like I remember Andreas asked our art director, he's like, well, I want to do a sermon, so like how do we make that happen? And she was there for him like every step of the way, but she let him do it. Like she said yes and gave him like the ability to share his experience to a wider congregation. And it's just like what it looks like when youth are allowed to step up and we have that power, but also that we have adults that are backing us in a way that's not like, super overbearing.
Yes, definitely yes to all of that. For me personally, I think that in con settings and in the leadership positions that I've held in my district, I've had a really good network of adult support. And I think we have a really good system set up in the Pacific Northwest right now regarding youth and adult leadership. And I think that I personally have experienced a really good balance of that. And I felt supported and heard, and I felt like I haven't been treated like, oh, like she's just a youth, like she'll need help with like all of this stuff. But like the trust in that if I need help, I will reach out instead of assuming that I need help with everything or I don't have time for anything. And then there's the other side of that, which is like totally hands off and not giving that support and not feeling like I have anyone to reach out to for help. And there's a very like precise balance that is really difficult to reach. And I think that the experiences that I've had have been pretty good. In my congregation though, the one thing that I think is one of the biggest difficulties being a youth like in a congregation is that sometimes adults don't really know how to interact with us. And I feel like sometimes the only questions I get are like, oh, like, where do you want to go to college? Or like, what grade are you in? And everything like relating to school and not actually stuff that I'm passionate about or interested in. And then also, so my sister Carrie just went off to college, and she is very outgoing and has a very large presence in UUism. And she, like everyone at the beginning of the year would just come up and ask me like, oh, how's Carrie doing? And the focus that adults have are a lot different than what I want to focus on. And it's a lot of not really knowing quite like what questions to ask or what things to talk about with the youth. And that creates like a weird divide. And also I feel like I'm not super connected to the adults in my home congregation, which is unfortunate. But
what do you wish they would ask you, Molly?
I wish that they would ask me about like my leadership work in UUism and other things that I'm involved in. I'm really passionate about environmental justice, and I do a lot of things within that, and people know about it. But it just seems like it's not really something, like they don't ask like things that I'm passionate about. And even if they don't know like what people are passionate about, like asking youth what they're passionate about and what they're interested in and what they like doing for fun outside of school, and letting them lead that conversation more is important.
Amen. Janine Gelsinger said, oh, I'd have to scroll. Hold on, because it's a good one. Oh, we talk a lot about what successful bridging of youth looks like, what young adult involvement looks like in congregations. I'd love to hear from Molly, Andreas, and Miguel. In the perfect scenario, although we're not going for perfection, right, Janine? In a great scenario, what would congregations be doing to have you transition into young adult leadership?
I think it's difficult because a lot of times when you're becoming a young adult, you're not around your home congregation. So I know for me, like after I bridge from Waynesboro, it's probably going to be a while before I go back there. And when I do, it'll probably just be when I'm home on breaks. So it's really hard for them to like give me the transition into young adult leadership when I'll only be back for a couple weeks a year. But I think what I've heard is that the campus ministry at Brown is actually pretty good. So I actually went to Goldmine with the sister of the lead of the Brown campus group. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah, it is difficult because most of us will move away from our home congregations after we bridge and after we graduate high school. And I think just creating a space for young adults. I know at my church, we have like once a month, they like get together for pizza and they talk about like UU related things and just like what's going on in their life. And just having a space for young adults, it doesn't necessarily have to look a certain way, but holding like that transition space between being a youth and being an adult, and also making sure that you're not treating them like they're 4 years old, especially when you've seen these youth like grow up in your congregation, and just acknowledging that they're in a different place in their life, and holding that space for them.
So there's a great question, I think Miguel wants to answer from online from AJ Van Tyne saying, my question for raised UU youth leaders is this: what is it about our religion that you love most that is why you identify as UU? Is it the principle, the religious pluralism, the social justice? What is it?
Putting me on the spot, but
You said you wanted to answer that question.
I said it was a good question. I didn't say I was going to answer.
Oh, okay.
But I would say I enjoy a certain amount the religious pluralism. Like Andreas and I often say, like, we're big Jesus guys. Like, you know, he's kind of a great guy. And so I enjoy being able to embrace that and embrace something that's special in my culture, like being able to have that connection while also feeling like I have a spiritual community that I can call my own and I can make my own. And I think in its best moments, what I see in the potential of what Unitarian Universalism can see, like, and what it can be, I think that's what brings me back time and time again.
The reason I'm dressed up actually is because I'm doing my capstone thesis on Unitarianism, and I have a presentation in an hour basically about it. So I went back and looked at like roots of Unitarianism, and I think that from the very, well, not from the very start, but once you start to get into when people are both socially liberal and religiously liberal, I think that's when a lot of like the social justice aspect comes in. And I know for a fact that if social justice was not like such a focal point for Unitarian Universalism, that I probably would not be in the faith anymore.
Yeah, I don't know if there's like a specific thing like the principles or the sources or any of that. But I think it's the like all of that combined and the potential that it has and the way that this faith has served me personally. Like that first experience that I had at Con and just the community that I felt there has been what keeps me coming back, and it's what has made me so involved. And it's the people that I've met through it and the relationships that I've built with both youth and adults and young adults. And also, in some ways, as a youth of color, well, yeah, being in this space can be really difficult and draining. And also, I think being a youth of color, my first experience like actually addressing that part of my identity was in a UU space. And it was at my first caucusing, like the first caucusing experience that I had was at that first con. And it was my first time being surrounded by people who like shared the same experiences as me and who were like not afraid to talk about those openly. And that was really powerful. And I've never had a space to hold that identity. And even though there were like maybe 10 out of 130 of us, and we could fit in like the smallest room of the camp, it was really powerful, and I had never embraced that part of me. And I think UUism has really helped me appreciate and love that identity that I hold.
Kiana Perkins, who's one of our top fans, writes, first we need to own that we'll need young adult leadership. Amen to that. Our spaces can't thrive as we only have disconnected youth leadership, and we have youth leadership and older adult leadership, and we need to cultivate the middle. And then Kiana goes on to say, we need to answer the big question, and maybe the three of you can answer this, or maybe all of us, what we think. What are we bridging our youth to? Are we really preparing them for what is next? Next being an open expanse. It does feel a little bit when we bridge youth, for me, like we're just, bye, have a good life. We hope to maybe see you in 20 years when you have your own children, but what are your impressions about that?
Well, and maybe the question for our panelists is, what would you like for there to be on the other side of the bridge? Like when you bridge into young adulthood, what would you actually like for there to be?
I know the UUA has like tried a lot of things, different things to try and make it work. And I know it's hard because like, if you're close with your youth group, you might all be going separate ways, whether that's college or something else. And it's tough because there's like that distance between you. But I think if there was a young adult space already ready for you to go into, that would definitely be really nice. I don't know how you do that necessarily, but that's not really my job to figure out. Yeah, I think it's hard to like sit here and like kind of look over the bridge and see what's beyond that. But I think that if there's a more defined space, because like we're talking about what happens when you bridge into this great expanse, and it's like, well, what if there was something for me there on the other side of the bridge where it's not like we're just waving goodbye to our youth and we just kind of assume that they aren't going to be active in college and their religion and they're just going to come back when they're like settled down. You know, I think it's damaging to our faith in a lot of ways.
I agree.
One of the things I want to highlight, I think, is something that Molly said, is that a lot of times our youth of color are encouraged to go into youth leadership, and it's hard to make space for them to just experience things without being in leadership. Bart Frost was really, really good at reflecting back to, I think, both of you, certainly back to me as a parent, to say, you know, I hear that they're interested in doing this thing as leadership. Is it something that they might just want to do as just participants and be able to be fed? I think is what you said, Molly. And I think it's important to recognize that it's slightly different for youth of color, because one of the ways in which harm is mitigated in our UU youth spaces for youth of color is by putting them in leadership, because they have more say over what's going to happen in those spaces. And that tends to help mitigate the harm that can happen to them in those spaces. And that's problematic.
Yeah, then you have this flip side of the coin where there's people going into leadership or forced into leadership who don't have the tools to be successful in that role. And then stuff happens, and then we lose our youth of color, and we lose our, like, you know, our siblings because something happened and now they're out of the faith, and, you know, we never really see them again. And it's really sad and it's really traumatic. And it's this cycle that we see keeps repeating itself. And, you know, it's really sad.
So I think there's got to be somewhere where we really examine that trend of, you know, how are we supporting youth once they're in leadership, and particularly how are we supporting youth of color once they're in leadership, and young adults, because often that leads to employment, and employment is where we often see it go. When it goes wrong, it goes spectacularly wrong. And you know, as Miguel says, and we lose mentors, and we lose people who we consider family.
I have a question for the youth here. I have a 13-year-old and a 17-year-old, neither of which are interested in going to anything like Thrive or Goldmine, because, well, for the 17-year-old, they didn't really have a great, how do I put this? They're one of the only children of color in their youth group. And then there were like just some class issues with that as well, and some value issues. And so they're like, why would I want to go be with a bunch of UUs? I'll just continue to teach kindergarten and first grade, and I like it that way. And I'm like, you really need to meet more UU of color that are your age. What could you say to them looking back as being someone that your mom was like, you're going? Because I'm at the you're going point, and I would like to have something to be like, I talked to these people and they said.
Yeah, no, I've been there, and I like cannot stress enough how much Thrive changed my perspective on Unitarian Universalism, and just like these spectacular people that you meet there. I mean, I was there, like, I didn't want to go. I was like, oh, do I have to go to Bethesda? Like, there goes my weekend. But it was just like so transformative, and I definitely wouldn't be in youth leadership now if it wasn't for that. Just the people that I've met through that, and then like an extension past that. Like I only know Molly because I met Jaden, and then it's like a whole thing.
Yeah, I think there's just kind of this powerful moment when you get there, and it's like, I mean, we never really seen youth of color like us before, all in one space, and you're kind of just like, oh, like, you know, like this is a thing, and yeah, you're kind of used to being like, do I have to like go hang out with like the white congregants again, and they're just gonna tokenize me as usual? But then you're sitting there and you all have that shared experience, and you're like, wow, like these people are really cool. Like these are gonna be my people. And I think you find that through putting yourself through an uncomfortable experience and being like, I was like, I don't want to go, but then I got there. Wow.
Let the record show that once Mama was right.
And we were really young when we went too. It was like, I guess it was the summer before our freshman year. And we got there, and like everybody was older than us, but I mean, it was like still I felt like so cared for, and I mean we look older too, so it wasn't like really that big an issue.
Yeah, definitely Thrive. And the other thing I want to say about Thrive is it's run by staff of color, adults of color who I trust. Like, thankfully, Christina and I, probably all the adults on this panel, know the folks, because part of what also can potentially be problematic is when there's lay leaders who aren't as as far along as would be helpful and affirming to youth of color. And so when they're in just spaces, con spaces, and they don't have that preparation and knowledge, I'm trying to be super nice right now, a lot of harm can happen. So I would say, Antonia, see how well I'm doing? It's sun's coming out, so it's helping. So I would say definitely, I would actually say start with Thrive. It's a extraordinary space, and I'm grateful to Reverend Dr. Monica Cummings, who I believe it was Monica who started the Multicultural Leadership School, which is now Thrive. Am I correct in saying that? Somebody, I think so, but Monica's not there anymore.
I think it's right.
The UUA, yeah, but now it's Thrive.
I agree with you completely. Knowing that those mentors will have my back in any space that I'm in was there was another incredible takeaway. Those are people that I know will have me no matter what. And that's one of the most powerful parts of Thrive, is that you see people who they might not have even grown up in the faith, but they're here now and they're ready to mentor you through this process. And it's super powerful to see yourself kind of reflected in those people that you look up to. And they're absolutely people that I couldn't trust more.
Shout out to Sanaa, India, Kimberly.
All of them.
And all.
Yeah, you
And
know,
I'll shout out to Hope and Janice Marie while we're at it, because my own kid who wouldn't do any of this, but I did drag to GA, but just hung out with my friends. But Hope and Janice Marie just took Jai in profoundly. And I love what you said about I found my people. I mean, that's when you stay, is when you found your people. And I'm so glad to hear three of you say you found your people. Yay.
Yeah, and while we're shouting out, some shout outs to the people who created, supported, and maintained the Drum Youth and Young Adult Caucus for all those years before any of these things were institutionalized at the UUA. So, Joseph Santos Lyons and Alandria Williams and some folks that many of us know and love, who made that space something that the UUA could create programs around.
And Kenny Wiley, one more shout out. Kenny Wiley, who was very strong. And I'm going to see Kenny this weekend. Yay.
Kenny and Razik and Bart were all people that I would trust my children to, and as a parent, and as a, UU leader of color myself, it has been invaluable to know who I can trust with my children. As particularly when things get rough, I know who I can look to ensure the safety of my children, not just physically, but spiritually. And that's huge. That's a huge thing to be able to know. Though I wanted to circle back to a question I think Meg asked, particularly of you, Andreas, is so what are national leadership opportunities for youth these days? What does that look like? Particularly with your role as senior dean of GA Youth.
Yeah, there are a couple different positions that you can apply for. Most of them that I'm in charge of is around GA Youth, which is the youth section of General Assembly. And so there are a couple different things you can do there. You can help with the Youth Caucus, which is like the business of the association. You can be a Thrive, it's called Youth of Color Coordinator now, but it was basically Thrive at GA. So making sure that people or youth of color specifically are cared for at GA. You can apply for Dean. This application cycle is closed, but next year. You can apply for Dean, which is I don't know, I should probably be able to explain it. But, yeah, and then you can also be worship coordinator, which is pretty self-explanatory, and care team as well, which is the general well-being of the youth at GA.
Right on.
And maybe Miguel is the person to answer this. Do they still involve youth and young adult leaders on the right relationship team at
Uh,
GA2? Is that something to look out for?
Yes, that's my role. I'm the youth liaison to that team. And there's actually a lot of young adults, the more I think about it, on that team who just do remarkable work. And it's great to know that those people have my back as well. So that's like another potential role for youth that are interested in leadership roles. Also, we have the safety team. Do we still have that?
Mhm.
Safety team. I know Molly was on that, and she could probably speak to it better than I can. But there's just opportunities abound.
So I have a question, given that the three of you all have been to GA, and we're coming to the top of the hour, and a lot of folks are starting to think about General Assembly. If there was like, maybe what is your favorite thing at GA? Maybe we'll start with that. What is your absolute favorite thing at GA? Molly, do you want to start with that, or any of you can jump in if you're still thinking? Sorry.
So I went to my first GA this past year. And I feel like I had a kind of different experience with it because my sister was the senior dean, and I saw a lot of more of the leadership side of it. But for me, my favorite part of like every youth event that I've been to is youth worship. And I think that was the evening worships were just the thing that I think about when I think of GA is the room full of youth, just sitting and listening and sharing. And that space is just always so powerful for me.
Yeah, I would echo that. Just huge shout outs to Emma Merchant and Iris. Their worships were absolute fuego. Like I can't even imagine another group of worship coordinators like them. Personally, my GA story is super full circle because my first GA was in Providence a couple of years ago, and now this is my bridging GA, and we're coming back to Providence, and I'm going to school there next year. So it's like a really perfect full circle moment that's part of my favorite part of being at GA is being able to interact with the space that you're in. And I remember my first GA, there's this really powerful moment when we had the water fire and they light up the whole river. And I was just like, wow, this is incredibly beautiful.
There's so many good moments. I'll pick a favorite moment. So it was after everything had wrapped up for GA, so maybe not technically my favorite GA moment, but it was like the winding down for staff last year, and we went to the gondolas in Spokane, and it was Emma Merchant, Michaela Latimer, and I and one. I swear I thought I was gonna die. I was very scared, but it was also really beautiful. The times that I didn't think I was gonna die.
I'm glad you didn't die. And I would just like to give a shout out for youth in worship. So 2 years ago, we did the first ever fully bilingual Latinx worship service at GA, a group of Latinx VUUs. And, we wanted it to be a collaborative event. And so we intentionally, had youth as part of that group that was developing that worship service. And because we were intentional about that, it ended up that really what the youth part of the service became what was in essence the homily of that service. And it was brilliant. I mean, it was just, if you can go back and listen to it, Andres and Miguel read it and participated in the creation of it, but the words from it were distilled from conversations that we had with the youth over the time of creating this. So it was like over 6 months that I would, sit and kind of transcribe what they were saying. And that became really the essence of their homily. And, so what would it look like to have a Sunday morning worship that the homily was given by youth? I mean, what would it look like to have a Sunday morning worship that was created by youth and not just a youth worship, right? Because that's what we're trying to do, is not just have these specific lenses of, of worship services, but worship services that are collaborative enough that you feel that throughout. So just a little challenge there to the worship arts team for GA. What would it look like?
And while we're referencing that worship, Miguel and Andreas, I used that worship service on a Sunday morning in the congregation that I serve. It was actually a Sunday morning that I was not going to be there, so I used that worship as the worship service. And there's one woman in my congregation who is Latina, who had been part of my overwhelmingly white congregation and went to that service and expressed profound gratitude for actually having seen her people up on the screen. So, there's that too. I just wanted to relay that to you. So thank you.
By far my most powerful memory of that service was actually what happened after Andreas and I were walking out of the room, and Michaela, who's our friend now, but we didn't really know her back then, she came up to us and she was crying, and she was just like, there are people like us out here, like who speak our language, who have this culture, and because of this, like, I know I have a place in this faith. And she said that to us, and it was so powerful to hear that.
Well, we are coming up on the top of our hour. Molly, Andreas, Miguel, is there any last thing that you want to say to make sure that people hear before we sign off?
Not really.
You don't have to.
Talk to your youth. Nice.
Ask them what they're passionate about. I heard Molly say that. Molly, what do you got?
Yeah, don't be scared of us. And we'll try not to be scared of you all, and connect with us.
Thank you all for getting out of school and coming to us before school. We appreciate it. Next week we have Dr. Elias Ortega Ortega. I forget which order it goes. And he is the new head of Meadville Theological School. So we are really, really excited to hear what he has to say about all things Meadville next week. That's it. Bye from the VUU. Bye, everyone.